Welcome to the ZBrush Podcast. Just a quick update in Pixologic news. We now have an official Pixologic Discord channel, so if you haven't signed up for Discord, go ahead and create an account. There will be a link that you can click in the description of this podcast to direct you to our channel. And essentially, Discord will give you a larger community tool to really keep up with all of the stuff we're doing on ZBrush Live, all of the streamers, be in more community chats and more of the social organization that's happening there. You can also tune into our ZBrush Live streams and chat. Discord is going to be a great extension and tool to keep up with all of the things that we're doing at Pixologic. And it's going to be a great community and networking tool to connect with other fellow ZBrushers out there and really start to build relationships with all of the people that we have tuning into ZBrush Live. It's a fantastic community, so check that out. And this episode is with our guest, Jessica Drew, who is a senior cinematic artist at Blizzard Entertainment. And not only does she work for one of the most amazing video game developing companies, Blizzard, but she's also been hosting our official ZBrush Sculpt-Off contest with one of our fellow Pixologic team members, Joseph Drust. They've been doing that for a few years at the ZBrush Summit. If you haven't checked that out, you can find that on our Pixologic YouTube channel. We've got all of the live broadcast replays available on YouTube. They're insanely fun to watch and just a great resource to watch others work and watch the artists sweat in a room against other artists and competing in a sort of friendly competition. And Jessica and Joseph do an incredible job hosting. So we were really excited to finally sit down with her and talk more about her and her history and everything that she does, and just to kind of get a breath of all the amazing creative talents and abilities that she has outside of being a great personality, but also a motivator, being a senior artist at Blizzard. And we talked a lot about what her experiences are like and what it's really like to work for one of the best video game cinematic companies on the planet and working in that kind of team environment, as well as getting into talking about her personal creative endeavors and the amount of stuff she's doing in the cosplay world. She designs and creates her own costumes and really goes the extra mile and takes her digital skills and things she uses in ZBrush. And we talk a lot about what it's like to sort of balance those things and follow this creative passion and apply this throughout your life. And it's just an incredible experience to sit down with a person like this who really truly tries new things out. So any of you that are interested in cosplay or video game cinematics or getting into the video game industry, this is a great person to listen to. So without further ado, this is the ZBrush Podcast with Jessica Drew. Officially, I want to thank you so much for coming on. It's a true pleasure.
Oh, thanks for having me. No, this is like really nice.
I wanted to try and set this up last year, but we didn't have the right time. And since you've been hosting the Sculpt-Off with Joseph for 4 years now.
Yeah, 4 years.
It's insane.
Time flies.
It really does. I was just in here with Martin Verhoeven and James Kane, and we were trying to figure out what year of the summit we are on. We're like 5 or 6. I don't know.
I actually don't know the answer to that either.
I think this would be 5.
Is it the 5th year?
5 or this is 4?
Okay. This is the 5th year total.
We have 2014, 2015, 16. This would be 5.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I started doing the Sculpt-Off in 15.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So
we're not terrible.
No, we're not terrible.
We're off by a year.
Yeah. After we just talked about all the languages and all the languages that we're forgetting, hard drive capacity.
We're doing pretty good.
Yeah, we are. We're doing okay, considering all things considered. So since you came on in 2015 to do the Sculpt-Off, well, I want to get to know you personally, and I don't know much about your art. You're an artist, so from what I can tell, you're kind of a Renaissance woman. But first and foremost, the Sculpt-Off. What's your general take on the summit itself and this whole experience and hosting the Sculpt-Off with Joseph?
You know, I'm super selfish as an artist. I love the summit because it's a place where sculptors can go and hang out. There's so few conventions or events that really centralize around sculptors or 3D artists in general. There's so many conventions out there for like animators or video games in general or movies or shows, but there's not very many places where it's the artists that are going, the artists that are hanging out, the artists that are showing off their art. Everything from like the panels to the summit to like the Sculpt-Off to everything. It's sort of centralized around the stuff I love the most. So the summit in general is like the best idea since sliced bread.
Dude,
and I'm super glad it exists.
That's the greatest compliment ever.
But that's me being selfish because I'm like, move aside all other art forms, make room for sculpting.
It's more of just leaving room for this, right? Because you're basically saying that it just hasn't been sort of highlighted.
No, exactly. And there's so many conventions or places where it's like all about animation. I feel like animators, Like they get their gesture drawing classes and they get their conventions, and they've got tons of places for them to be awesome at animating.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But it's just so rad to have these moments where it's all about like sculpting and digital sculpting and printing it all out. Like it's really satisfying. This is one of the few places where it exists.
So you're really into this stuff.
I love it. Yeah.
And you've been using ZBrush for how long? If you could put a time frame on it.
So before I went to Gnomon, I had never done any digital art.
Okay.
So I went to Gnomon from 07 to 09. And that's where I got introduced to ZBrush. And because I was at Gnomon, ZBrush, like the folks were right there. This is back when Ryan Kingsland was the principal artist, but also teaching ZBrush at Gnomon. So like my access to getting people to answer my questions or seeing what's new that was coming out, getting to work with the most up-to-date version of ZBrush.
You were kind of getting you're getting all the current information.
Oh my goodness, super spoiled.
It's probably a good time.
It was really. And, when I left Gnomon, ZBrush was still, or like just digital sculpting in general.
Yeah.
This was right when ZBrush was switching from 2 to 3. So suddenly it was like really the jam for things to be using. But digital sculpting in general was an under-known skill. And so anybody who had that skill was actually really quite valuable.
Yeah. Something I used to, for me coming up in VFX and animation and all of this, you'd see a lot of VFX production pipelines and you see the green screen wipes and you got all of these sort of flashy things. But then like the creation of the asset itself and the modeling aspect is like you were saying, it's only now recently becoming more of a viewed as a sort of art form just outside of the creation for production and all that stuff, which I guess the Sculpt-Off in itself I think is the purest form of that, right?
Is.
And you get to watch all these guys sort of naturally go through it and sweat. They're sweating bullets in there, aren't they?
Oh my gosh, the adrenaline is so high, especially when they start. Like when they finish up, there's like a palpable sense of like relief among all of them.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my gosh, I can actually go, I need to go get a smoke,
Right.
But when they're just about to start, like it's intense. They're all really quiet because in their heads, they're like, I have to accomplish what, in a normal sit down working on something would take you quite a long time.
Absolutely.
And they have to get it done with no errors, with no technical issues in 3 hours. But also because everybody's sort of peeking over their shoulders. Do you ever do that with art where you're working on something and you've got somebody who walks up behind you and suddenly you can't do any of it?
Oh, yeah, totally.
So they also have to overcome that knowing that people are watching
them.
And not having that like nervous flutter of working with these tools they're super used to working with all the time.
James Cain was in here talking about his second time where he had his music set up and he's like really feeling the music and like bobbing his head looking around, and I think he was commenting basically that people are looking at him like he's almost intimidating. He was like, why is that guy so happy? He's got something figured out.
Does he know that we don't know?
Exactly.
But I think it was like second time around, anything that you could imagine or think of in your head that might have made you nervous is no longer the case. Like veterans, super cool.
Yeah, and I think I don't see it as a competitive nature. It's more of that, like
all.
they were saying, you compete almost with yourself. You just want to show out with your best quality of work, and you want to make the best thing because everybody's going to see it. And it's a lot of pressure. But then I guess some people come in with the right setup, to get the right music, maybe
they hit their groove real early on.
Yeah, they get their groove.
Well, art is that groove, right? Especially sculpting, right?
Yeah.
Because you get into this kind of like meditative creation stage, and it is like there's a whole theory on like theta waves with meditation, and that there are some things that you can do that are meditative with your hands.
Yeah.
And I feel, at least for me, sculpting is one of those things. So if you can find that groove, just like what you're pulling from your subconscious to bring into the art, and then what you're creating, it just is like on another level. And if you can get that, you can get so much done, and it's just like your hands are flying.
Yeah, well, we were talking about staving off cravings of sugar and caffeine and all those other things. So I almost see it as a manipulation of the brain, where you might have a lot of other thoughts and you're stressed about something else. But when you get into that, at least for me, when I get into ZBrush, especially if you're getting in and just spending a lot of time doing everything sculpturally by hand, not doing any technical stuff, it turns into this rhythm where even if you're listening to music, like you kind of get into this focus where everything else kind of flows out. Yeah. And that it sort of like tunnels you right in.
It's really good for you, to be honest. Like finding times where you can just kind of like let go of the stuff that's bogging you down. Art is a really wonderful way to just embrace a moment and creating something. Yeah. And in the end of it, you end up with really, really cool art. But also, like, you've kind of cleared your mind of anything that was stressing you out, and then maybe putting some stuff back into focus at the end of it all, so that when you like back out of ZBrush, that like, you're like, you know what?
You warp in, then you warp back out, right?
Yeah, you're like, that thing actually isn't that important. It's not that scary, or it's not that big a thing.
That's a really good point. That's good advice for all the people out there that are stressing about their work. Like, don't just enjoy the process, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're going to be a working artist, find ways to find joy or love or passion for each thing, no matter how kind of small they are, because it's really, really good for you as an artist to find ways to kind of like refill your cup.
Yeah.
You know, like production is stressful. Staying inspired is the real thing that like a lot of artists, when they reach a certain point in their tenure, that are like, well, how do I keep that motivation and that inspiration up? How do I maintain that level of focus, drive, and passion at my work and at my job that I did when I was young, fresh, right out the gates, you know?
Because and when you're young and fresh, the sort of the thing that's pushing you along, inspiring is to reach that goal. You have that thing of like, I got to get that job at that studio, and I got to do this thing, or my portfolio's got to be this. That's enough motivation in itself.
It's a fire under you. Yeah.
But it's like you're chasing after this thing, and then as soon as you get it, like sometimes we don't know what to do with it. Yeah, you know? Like, and you get there and you're like, okay, I got it now. What do I do?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and then, or how do I I was really needing that fire. How do I put that fire back into me?
So then how do you deal with those things?
That's all my weekend projects. So like, I love working digitally. Every single day at work at Blizzard, I'm working digitally 100% of the time. It's Photoshop, ZBrush, Max, Maya, whatever is needed. I'm making these characters. I'm making other people's ideas, and I'm bringing cool concepts from my directors to life. And I love it.
That's the best.
You know? But on the weekends, I found that the more I was doing digital art on the weekends, the less I had to offer in terms of that kind of like energy at work. And I was like, oh, snap. I don't want to like steal from the fire of creating.
It's almost too much.
I was like, what can I do to sort of like balance it out? But I still love making art. So on the weekends now, I do stuff with my hands. So I'll make costumes physically, or I will art direct whole photo shoots, or I'll sculpt in clay.
Wow.
So I'm still getting that sort of like artistic push or creative outlet, but it's not all selfish.
It's not quite the exact same thing. It's a little bit of a departure into something else.
Yeah, it super is, because it's all my own ideas. And it's all my own thoughts and processes. And one of the craziest things, okay, so this is weird, right? Because I thought, oh, you have to work super hard on all your digital stuff in your spare time, so that way you can show off how badass you are and wonderful and get the next thing. But it turned out that, at least for me, on the cinematics team, was working on costumes, working on these whole cinematic photo shoot setups, working on all these sculptures. All the people that I was working with were paying attention and like watching the art that I was creating every single weekend, every new thing that I was working on. And then they started recommending me for cooler and different jobs and stuff at work. And it was like, oh snap, first of all, I didn't.
Up a whole nother world.
It did. I just didn't expect anybody I was working with to really care about elves and stuff. You know, I mean, that's my jam.
But it's Blizzard.
Fantasy, right?
Yeah.
But no, and exactly that. Like, so all of my love for fabrics and my love for making things physically and like costumes and making stuff work and choreography with like fighting and these things, all that stuff kind of circled back around to like my job.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh my gosh, you're so good with fabric, and you're the only person we know that's good with fabric in real life. Can you learn Marvelous Designer and bring that skill in?
Whoa.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, of course, I'll learn anything you guys need. Shit, this is easy.
This is easy.
But then, or I'd be pulled in with like concept artists who'd be like, I'm really trying to figure out how this would move. What's your opinion?
Oh, wow.
What do you think? So you kind of how would this work?
All of these experiences are giving you this wealth of knowledge that everybody else is spending so much time in the digital world. Like you're breaking out into the physical and doing this stuff by hand, which feeds right back into all this
stuff. Super fed right back in. And it was just me being selfish and trying to find a way to make sure that I was 100% every single Monday to come back and sit down and work.
Yeah.
And it was just really delightful that all of these folks that I was working with saw it as a positive, like as a net positive and not a distraction.
That's amazing.
It really was. I'm so freaking lucky to be working with the folks that I am working with. I think it's the film background, to be honest, because film's costume department is just as important as like every other department to making stuff. And so I think they were coming from that point of view.
I see. So they kind of see that as an aspect, like, well, that's very smart on their part to recognize that instead of saying like, get back to your desk, do more sculpting, you know, like can be a struggle. And, you know, I see as instructing, you see a lot of young people coming in where it's like, it's almost becomes a crutch in your shoulder with that amount of hours that you spend. Like, oh, I got 3 hours of sleep last night. And like, that becomes a badge of honor.
But I did that too.
And it's like, you burn yourself out though, right? And
burnout is real. It's like, are you approaching your career as a marathon or as a sprint?
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, when you're building yourself up as an artist or getting the cool new job, yeah, that's totally a sprint because you're just trying to get to the point where you've got the right resume, the right skill set, everything that you need to know to be a good production artist. Like that, I get it. That's a sprint, right? You want to be valuable immediately.
Right.
You
get
but
good
the
at
rest
sprinting.
of your career is a marathon.
Yeah.
And it's like, stay motivated, stay energized, stay positive.
Yeah.
And what does it take for you to achieve that? For some people, it's surfing. Like
Yeah.
for Seth, my husband, it's surfing.
Same for me. Yeah, truly is.
And it's that touching nature and it's that meditative moment out on the waves where nothing else sort of touches you.
For sure. I hit that wall myself where I was the same. And I spent years doing that stuff. And I got to the point, it was around, you're saying David Lesperance is like 25, 26. It was about the same age. And I was like, okay, this is, I got to dial this back. And like, what else do I like to do? What else do I want to do in my life? And ended up being surfing or getting outside and hiking. And I know you climb as well, which I started climbing years ago. And I've transitioned that into the gym. But climbing's like another form of therapy, isn't it?
It's so nice. I like climbing because if you're sort of a video game person,
same.
It presents things as individual quests. Like each little climb is a different challenge and you achieve it and then you get better and better. And then as you go up through the different levels of climbing difficulty, that's like gaining levels.
Yeah.
Downside is those levels degrade the longer you're away. So like when you lose your calluses and all that
It's a good
stuff.
way to describe it.
It's such a healthy way of approaching a sport because you're never competing with somebody else. You're competing with yourself.
Right.
You're challenging yourself internally. And
you're still mentally too. It's a problem. It's a puzzle. You're problem solving in a way where it's like, I have to do this route, or you can rearrange something and try something new. And like, oh, that actually works out really well with that, with that mark. Or I guess depending on if you're getting into like, do you lead climb at all or do you mostly just boulder?
I love bouldering because it is a puzzle, but also, you know how we're working at computers all day, every day?
Yeah.
And your tendons and your hands and your arms end up getting really kind of screwed up. I found that climbing is actually a wonderful cross training.
It helps strengthen
because
your hands
it's strengthening, but it's stretching at the same time.
Yeah.
So you're getting all of this like tendon, muscle, stretch and strength.
Yeah.
And knock on wood, but I haven't really dealt with any carpal tunnel issues.
That's fantastic.
Or any of these things that can plague an artist who's sitting at a desk for 10 to 12 hours a day, or anything more than 8. Shoot, let's be real. If you're sitting at a computer for really any long period of time, you're going to suffer just these things.
For sure.
And I found that climbing was just like a really good way to kind of like alleviate a lot of the stuff that I was experiencing.
That's so cool.
But
and
it
bouldering's
also
the most fun, I think.
it's super fun. It's super selfish because like you don't have to have somebody belaying you.
Yeah.
You can just go to yourself, like by yourself, headphones in, climb the things. I love the body contortion that you have to do just
especially
to
when
like
you get like a 45-degree angle and you're going over. Those are the best.
Don't you love
yes.
the
I love it. I like to like reach out as much as I can and see what I can do. And a lot of times I'll fall and I'll try
you
again.
and your height.
I think we're probably the same height. I'm not very tall. I'm 5'9".
I never feel...
I like to claim that I'm 5'10". That's what it says on my driver's license, but it's not true.
You're still inches taller than me, which is great.
Okay. Well, yeah, but then I guess like the difference in our size, then you could probably climb 10 times faster than I can. I'm pretty slow.
I can crimp on stuff a lot easier. That's actually the super secret skill that I've got.
Yeah.
Tiny hands.
Yeah. Tiny hands.
So I can end up, grabbing a screw sometimes, and that's like all I'll need.
Is that a Scary Movie reference? The tiny hand guy?
Tiny hands. Smells like cabbage, right? No, that's a Simpsons joke about carnival folk.
Oh, I thought that was also in Scary Movie 3. Oh, anyways, continue.
But like these things that you have to do to just like maintain your sanity and maintain your focus as an artist. Art asks a lot of people creatively, motivationally, and focus. Like how a lot of artists kind of come from like this sort of like, I love everything and seeing everything is amazing, and then you're put in this production environment and you have to have laser focus and a clear goal and like all this mental reference for stuff that you want to pull into your art, everything from environments to characters. You have to have an understanding of art and people in the world and environments, and there's just so much you're pulling from, and you have to like laser focus it into the thing that you're making for production and then get it approved.
And then and like, so do you find that sort of that channeling, is that sort of it can be a hindrance in a way sometimes? It's sort of taking you away from that sort of loving everything to like you get locked into one thing.
That's why you got to find that balance.
Yeah.
Because if you were locked in all the time, 100% of the time, you're going to be empty.
Right.
You know, like you're going to empty all your good ideas, all your good inspiration that you're like, no, I already kind of did that. No, that's kind of repetitive from the last thing. And it's because you're not building new experiences like back into your box.
Yeah.
You know, your toolbox of like cool stuff.
Yeah.
When I started doing like a bunch of photo shoots and a lot of like environmental stuff, like going out on adventures, I started looking at the sky and environments differently. And I swear I should have been doing this when I was an environment artist, because like now my appreciation for things as simple as like rocks and trees and the shapes that they create is utterly different, because I'm perceiving things through like a cinematic lens. I'm looking at it through like the photographer's lens. And, you know, I'll stop and take pictures of the sky and send it to like different photographers. And I'm like, I hope you are outside right now taking
just to
photos.
Like inspire people?
No, because I'm just like, it's so beautiful. And California, unfortunately, we don't get very many pretty skies. They're always kind of like blank blue.
Right.
But like when we get clouds, and okay, this is
that
awful.
One random sunset where you get like a nice quality, you know, set of clouds. Yeah.
Like this might sound awful, but when the fires were going on really close to Blizzard, I basically was kicking photographers out of the office, and I'm like, go take reference
a good time
pictures.
to take photos.
Bring out the reflective ball and get those HDRI maps. Like go get all of it, because while it's terrible and there's so much loss associated with it, what you're perceiving is something that you can't get otherwise. It's this sort of like orange, awful sky with this quality of light and atmosphere that you just can't make up.
Right. You're getting the most real depiction of that. That's something that actually happens a lot in video games, especially in Blizzard video games. You know?
Yes.
Yes. No correlation whatsoever. Just pure coincidence.
Yeah. And so it's just like, we need this. We need to take a moment. Yeah, I know we've got a lot of deadlines, but take a moment to look at what's going on, because it's impressive. It's beautiful in how terrible it is. And it's something that you want to store in your own personal, you know, artistic box of reference.
Yeah.
You know, so like I was
beautiful.
Pictures, it was gorgeous. And the whole day, because it was one really bad day of smoke, and it was different depending on where you were up. If you're up in the foothills, it was like real apocalyptic. If you were down by the ocean as it drifted out over the sea, and where it's clear sky to forest fire sky, and just like the sun setting between the two was just
gotta be incredible.
Phenomenal.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. It's terrible for what's happening in those neighborhoods and that part of. But the fires are still going, correct? I think
that's California, though.
Yeah, this isn't the first time it's happened. I mean, I remember 2 years ago it was snowing ash in Santa Monica for a few months.
So crazy. But like, I'm nearly certain every single person who works in film was out there being like, I'm going to get this. So that way we don't have to actually have it happen to depict it in film or to depict it in art.
So I guess through all these experiences, as you transition through all these new things you're doing cosplay, you're doing photography, you're still doing ZBrush and Photoshop and concept art as well.
Yeah.
So how are you managing all these things across your day? Are you doing these things periodically throughout the week? Or you separate them from week to weekend still?
Well, so like work is always work, right? Yeah. And I'm super fortunate that like my job lets me run the gamut of skills, right? Like I'm needed for so many different things that it's everything from, you know, the topology centric, like keeping things clean for our animators, to sculpting characters and figuring out what people look like, to the texturing. Like I did not know that I would end up being
so
texturing.
Much.
But like I've got a concept I've got to finish right now, and I'm really stoked for it. So trying to work smartly in a way that I can then aid myself later on when I actually have to make it.
Yeah.
So
Dude,
I love it. So like my work is delightful.
Yeah.
I really love all the opportunities that I'm afforded, all the different properties that I get to work on, because it's like World of Warcraft, Overwatch. I got to do like Diablo Necromancer stuff.
That's so sweet.
Like I get to do a whole bunch of different art styles all the time. So that's like my work week, right?
Yeah.
And that's 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. every single day, which is delightful hours for a sleepy person.
That's a very great hours.
And then when I get home, it's like, okay, well, what do I want to do? Sometimes I'll have like a cool idea that I really want to get out with like friends, where I'm like, okay, I want to go out to the desert, light everything on fire, and we're going to be dragons. Yeah. You know, and like trying to.
Yeah, you coming with?
Yeah. You into that?
You into that?
And then like trying to like draw like super quick sketches of like what I'm thinking, but also leaving room for other artists to bring their input. Cause like, I'm not like my ideal or bust. That's
You're just
nonsense.
excited about it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm like,
you're like,
dragons.
You guys want to get into this? Like, let's go do it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
And
what do you think? What do you think about this?
Yeah, it's like, what do you think? Well, what does dragon mean to you? Like, what kind of dragon do you want to be? And I'm coming with like this D&D background of like spectral dragons. Like the dragon that I ended up doing was kind of like a Takesis. Now, if you play D&D,
I don't. You'll have to
she
describe
is the goddess of evil. And she's like this she's technically a 5-headed dragon.
Okay.
And I was just her red dragon form.
Okay.
And a friend of mine who does headdresses, who's stellar and amazing. Like she made headdresses that were dragon themed for us. So I made the costume. She made these headdresses. We all went out to the Salton Sea in the middle of the desert. By the way, another one of those beautiful, terrible places in California. So it's a toxic lake.
I've heard of this. That's it's like
You've never
plastine.
been.
They have like there's tons of bones. Everything decomposes in there. I've seen tons of photos. It's actually been on my list. How is it?
Please go.
Yeah.
Well, now that it's becoming autumn, it's actually worth adventuring out to. I actually really recommend to anybody who's visiting California. Yes, we've got beautiful beaches and there's some really cool mountains, but this is a environmental disaster. So no one's in the water.
Right.
It's this miles-long lake that no one's at.
Yeah.
And it's an empty beach of just like crushed fish bones.
Oh, there's probably so much
And
great
it's
reference
this
out there.
lake that's just placid that leads off into a mountain range, and then the sun sets behind it. So it's just this.
Is it very reflective? I guess it would be
Perfectly reflective.
That's so
And so you're
awesome.
just getting this like beautiful array of color from your sunset that mixes into the water and then meets at dusk where you can't tell
That's
the
gotta be
difference between the two.
incredible.
It's gorgeous.
So you've gone out there and taken a lot of
A
photos.
lot of, and that's one of the few places where the folks like the nature rangers. What do you even call those guys? But
I don't know.
Just rangers,
right? Rangers are usually always
Yeah.
in nature.
yeah, but like those
Industrial
guys,
rangers are totally
they're
different.
totally okay with you bringing fire to the lake.
Really?
Or smoke bombs. You know, California
Is usually pretty strict on fires everywhere.
Don't light fires willy-nilly. California
Yeah.
lights on fire really easily, but
Yeah.
this is a place where there's nothing that can catch fire.
I see.
You're next to water. It's fish bones. Fish bones don't burn.
Yeah.
So we can go out there and take smoke bombs and
cool.
light, like have our fire-breathing friends like blowing flame and
So
just
you guys
doing
do a
cool
lot
stuff.
for
Yeah.
Blizzard. You do a lot of official reference there, I'm guessing.
I haven't got like any of like the Blizzard crew out there. Like our sound team has gone out into the middle of the desert and
cool.
done explosions and gunfire to get like really good solid
Yeah.
reference. They did like this whole behind the scenes video that was released on one of the DVDs where they were going
sweet.
out to a desert to get like good sound of just like big fire, big explosion, all this like really cool stuff. And it like that's like the coolest field trip. Now, if I could convince some of my like friends and coworkers at Blizzard to like adventure with me, oh man, I'd super love to, because like there's so many cool places that California can offer that aren't what you think of when you think of California.
Yeah, I can imagine. You probably got a whole laundry list of places like that.
I like to keep track of environments where people don't mind you being there, being weird.
Doing crazy things,
dragon
showing
stuff.
up with cosplay and giant costumes, and like, what are they doing over there? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I always want to be like super respectful of like these places, beaches.
Yeah.
Like I've got my go-to beaches that have a lot of like rocks mixed with the water, because like the placid sand beach that leads to water is visually bland. So I'm always on the hunt for like rocky
Right,
structural
to just kind of
beaches.
contrast all of that a little bit.
You want elements that connect land and sea and reflection and break it up, and then actually have stuff that you can work with compositionally.
Like, do you ever go down to Palos Verdes and like everything from there down to Laguna? You've got so much.
Laguna
beach
is one of my go-tos.
Laguna's so awesome.
There's
All the tide pools and everything. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. There's actually like a little like castle structure that somebody built. Like they built a spiral staircase from their house on a cliff down to the beach. And so it's this leaning Rapunzel tower on the beach. And that one's really cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you spend a lot of time there as well.
Because I live in Orange County.
Oh, okay.
I'm always like hunting down like beaches. Actually, Los Angeles makes it really, really hard because of Film LA. You can't just willy-nilly go with like a photography crew.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because you just don't want to make anybody's job hard, you know? And so if you show up and then the forest or, lifeguard ranger person is just like, this is not a good place to do this. Do you guys have permits? And you're like, we're just nerds. I'm sorry.
This is for personal work.
Yeah, I've definitely got pictures with like forest rangers where I'm dressed up as a fairy, where I'm just like, I'm so sorry, we didn't know.
Anywhere on the internet? Do you post those on Instagram?
I post like on Facebook or something, but they were super cool about it.
Yeah.
They're like, no, normally you need a permit, especially on weekends. And I'm like, oh, you don't just go hiking with fairy wings? And they laughed. They were so
This
nice.
is how I dress always.
But like, we don't go back to that place because I would never want to make their jobs hard.
And those jobs are very difficult. Those people have a lot of responsibility, and there's a lot of people who break those laws. And so it is. That's very respectful of you.
Yeah. So it's all about it's always leaving Los Angeles and going on an adventure.
That's so cool.
Right now, desert. Go out to the desert because autumn and spring are beautiful times, good temperatures, and wild structures.
Yeah.
But that's artistic.
So you're doing all of this
feeding
stuff at Blizzard. You seem like you're pretty content and happy with this right now.
I love it.
Do you have anything else that you're sort of working towards, or anything that you might want to sort of break out and do on your own? Or are you pretty happy with where you're at?
Well, so every single time I sort of want to do something more, I'm given cool responsibilities or a new challenge at work. I'm really
So that kind of
happy.
offsets it. So you're like,
so
I'm good.
Happy.
That's great.
Right now, so I'm a senior artist on the in-game cinematics team, and I'm the only character artist on that team. But whenever production needs require it, I end up taking on the role of project lead, and I pull artists to work for me and with me on projects. So I'm getting cool leadership experience and project management experience, and also trying to convey my own knowledge to people who aren't doing what I do on a regular basis, and just kind of sharing that. So that's a new challenge that I'm really excited about becoming better at.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a way that I flex on a day-to-day basis. Me at work is headphones on, hoodie up, jam into art, right?
That's so
I'm
crazy.
this
You're just a ball of energy. You have all this,
but that's because I'm headphones,
so
hoodie.
you're kind of you do need to have that time where you sit down and you kind of focus on your work, and then you can sort of detach and separate in those two ways. Yeah, I think that's a skill in itself for some artists. Not everyone's able to break out of that shell. I guess you said at some point you weren't as social. This is something that you've sort of developed through these challenges that you've been presented with, I guess.
Well, just learning how to be social, but it's all about teamwork, right?
Yeah.
And conveying wants or needs or stuff that we got to work on together properly, in a team environment.
Yeah.
I've always found it's bring joy, right?
Yeah, sure.
Bring a positive attitude, and no matter how hard or difficult something that you're facing, so long as you're approaching it with joy, because we're working on really cool stuff all the time.
Yeah, you should love this.
It's never going to really go wrong. But just being social in general, thank goodness for the internet.
Well, yeah.
I didn't even know how to start conversations with people until AOL came out.
Oh, well, those are the days. AOL
Right?
Instant Messenger, I grew up on that one, that's for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chat room.
Same. Nice Guy FL, 09 or 05.
When you're a kid and if you're really nerdy like I was, no one's having conversations with you, so you don't even know how conversations are supposed to go.
Right.
You're
it is tough to navigate,
how
especially
do
at that
I?
age.
Yeah.
That made it a lot easier.
Chat rooms was really easy because then I could try to have conversations, and if I failed, well, it's just an internet person.
Totally.
And I was a boring 14-year-old, whatever. And there was a lot of them.
We were all boring.
No, super, right?
You know?
You've got no life
What do you
to
know?
be interesting about.
Yes, exactly. You can pretend, but it's all relevant to that time period. Then you look back and you're like, oh man, I've really grown up a lot.
I super appreciate what it did because I just used those same skills in real life, and I was like, oh, okay, I can kind of talk to people. And then it got less and less scary and easier.
Totally. Isn't it crazy that our whole society is it really uses that as a tool now? Like our chats for the live streams are just going constantly.
I love it.
Were you guys monitoring that during the Sculpt-Off, by the way?
I'm paying attention to all the art, and every once in a while, if nothing is if people are doing kind of more technical end of things, I'll be like, oh, what's going on over in chat? I want people to feel like they've got a voice with what's going on with the Sculpt-Off, because it's interesting, everything. It's what are you paying attention to? Because we can just show you more of that if you mention it.
Yeah.
Everybody who's taking their time out of their day to watch the Sculpt-Off with us, they care about this stuff. They're super into this stuff. So it's they're just like us.
Yeah.
It's a text-based conversation that we're having, me and Joseph.
Totally.
So.
But you feel this connection, there's that shared interest, and we were talking about earlier, just people wanting to watch other people work is so fun and relaxing.
So satisfying.
And the most fun, I was telling you, I put that stuff up and I work sometimes, and I'll just listen to you guys banter back and forth because I don't get to see all these things, especially the last couple of years that we've been doing the podcast, but it's so fun. I'm jealous. You guys have the coolest job at the Summit, I think, by far. And you're so good at it, truly.
Thank you.
Truly, yeah.
But, the Sculpt-Off in itself is just such a cool event because it's taking the time and taking sponsorship to create a period of time, a whole day where artists just get to make art.
Yeah.
And they get to make cool dang art that's their own ideas. You're not being like, you need to do something in this style and this way.
Right.
No, it's like, here's the loose concept. So long as you're filling the role of the contest, just show us what you can do. And everybody in the Sculpt-Off is approaching it from such like a Zen state. Like no one's hyper competitive or like, I'm going to, cut this guy and then I'm going to win.
Like, hey,
it's going to be amazing.
Check this out.
No, they're just like, look what I did. And everybody afterwards is just like, oh, that's so cool that you did that idea. Oh, I love how you created the dimensionality of this character with the, elements reaching back into the frame. Like,
do you see them collaborating at the end? Like once it's done, do they all kind of go around and chat?
They do go around and check out
cool.
what everybody else is doing. It's this definite like catharsis release of all that adrenaline, getting to see what everybody else has done and just being delighted that artists are making art.
Yeah.
So like for Pixologic and everybody to come together and make that a possibility, because like it takes time and energy and money just to get those artists out here and make it worth their time and make it interesting for everybody and just like fostering an environment where people can just be creative and then everybody rejoices in how cool the things that people made.
Yeah.
Like that's such a healthy thing to offer back into the world.
Yeah. Do you see that as sort of just as far as the summit in itself is kind of like that, right?
It really is.
It's like I've talked to everybody about this and we do have this sort of like intimate collective group of people that are sort of on that same wavelength. And everybody here is just so pumped coming from all of the countries.
True.
Yeah. And it's great. I think you'd be awesome to compete at some point. Have you thought about that? Yeah. I mean, you can't do both, but maybe one of these years.
There's a lot of pressure, right?
Yeah.
Like to make some cool stuff. And while I'm really, really fast with clay, like actual physical clay.
Oh, interesting.
Digital clay, I get super hung up on.
Spend more time on.
Well, like I'm a production artist. I'm not like a concept person.
Yeah.
I'm not just like jamming on cool ideas. Like I'm making stuff so that it works overall. So it's really hard to disengage the make it work brain.
Things.
They super are.
Yeah.
They
totally.
super are.
You have to spend more time with technical, topology, UVs, texturing, all that kind of stuff. The concept people, they're kind of just get to freely just mash stuff
it's just
together.
like.
Yeah, right.
I would really have to train up some of those skills that I've kind of let atrophy since I'm so much in production now.
Maybe like 2 years from now, we can get you in there. That'd be so cool.
It would be so cool. But like, it's like a stage for artists that maybe aren't well known to get the opportunity to create stuff and also be noticed by companies because companies pay attention to that stuff. Like they're always looking for who's cool and awesome at art. And it's such a great platform to just show off what you can do and what your brain is thinking up. I love sculpting. I actually think I'm going to do the little 15-minute Michelangelo challenge.
Oh, do it.
I have to because it's so cool.
Tried when we were putting this together.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, everybody in the office is going to go through and do it. And I'm so spoiled when it comes to, I grew up with CG, I grew up on building base meshes and go to ZBrush and Subdivide. And then we got Dynamesh. And that was around the time when I started at Pixologic a couple years before that. So Dynamesh opened up this whole new floodgate. But I spent so much time sort of working across subdivisions and all of that. I totally take that stuff for granted and being able to move up and down and add and subtract and use the move brush. But going in and just doing subtractions, I tried it. I was like, oh, no thanks. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'll pass on that one. Better sculptors out there are going to make some great work.
It's going to be so cool to see like the end results of everything. Oh, I'm super amped.
Rock it.
Just because like how fun. It's only 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You're doing something super cool.
Totally.
Yeah.
Do it. I think it'll be great. And in the challenges, it's more or less for fun more than anything else.
Very much so.
Yeah. So it's not a competition. Maybe I should just like suck it up and just do it. I should just go out there.
We can both.
All right.
Just eat our egos and
all right,
and
fine.
do a
I'll let
thing.
my ego go and I'll do it. It's like I don't want people to see it, No, just kidding. I have to share work. But so I guess because you kind of going back to the Sculpt-Off stuff, you have kind of made it to that next stage. You seem like you're a true leader at Blizzard and you're supervising other artists. So for you in that position, what kind of advice would you offer to these new artists and these new people coming into the industry?
Like everybody has so much talent nowadays because there's so much information out there and available and enabling artists to become really cool, really awesome right away. Be the person that people want to work with, You could be the most amazing artist, but if you're kind of difficult to work with or grumpy all the time, it makes it really hard for people to like buy into that, because they're picking somebody that they're going to be working with for 8 hours a day, every single day of the week. Be a person that steps up and is like, yeah, I'll take the UVs for everybody just to get this project out the door. Like, especially if you're a baby artist, right? Like you're just starting out.
Yeah.
Like do the grunt work. Don't be wrapped up with your ego. You're there to learn. There's so much to learn from folks in the industry. I have so much to learn. Like, let's be real.
Yeah.
I'm working with some of the most amazing artists in the world at Blizzard. And I feel super fortunate that I get to be there every single day with them. And that if I ever have a question, I can go out there and learn from them. And the fact that I would ever have anything to offer to other artists, like, delights me, right? But it's also like, whoa, wait, really?
Is it still kind of shocking? And you're just like, wow, I have made it to that place.
Yeah, it's really, really odd. And I mean, I'm just a project lead, right? So like I'm bringing people on and we're there as a team to get stuff done. I don't feel like a supervisor. I feel like a person that's like understands the scope of what we need to get done for a particular cinematic. And and I'm like breaking down like the technical challenges and sort of just like delivering stuff and bite-sized to the different artists and hopefully like getting them excited about whatever part they're participating in. It's like I would much rather people be, and this comes from like another place, like if you're just starting out, like I would so much rather somebody be excited about what work is being presented to them. Like, we got to work on gnarly trees or something, for instance, right? Like, and for them to just be like, oh, cool, what type? Like, are we doing like pine trees? Or is it going to be like oak trees? Actually, there's this oak tree that like is on my background at my desktop. Like, come check this out. But like passion, just finding joy in the work are two like really subjective qualities that artists really do value. And then, you know, the skill set, like just assume that you've got the skill set and that skill set comes from hard work. Yeah. Like always be willing to put in the extra work, always be willing to redo the thing. Like when somebody gives you critical feedback that sucks, right?
And that's always hard sometimes.
Just embrace it and like take a step back, evaluate what needs to be done and just reapproach it to get it done. It's everybody's in it just to make a good final project. Yeah. It's not anything personal. And it's not even that was bad, right? It could have just been that the art director is like, no, I've got this different vision now. Yeah. Which can be exhausting, but it's necessary.
And as an artist, I always say we do it to share it and get appreciation. So when you do get that harsh feedback or you might be happy with it and you might think that, oh, they're going to love it. Yeah. But then sometimes it might not come back that way, but it kind of has to be okay. And ultimately you are working as a team to make that vision come to light, right? So ultimately you do kind of have to let the ego go a little bit in a way. And eventually then you get to do what you do, which is break out and then become more of a creative person and do the things that you fully want to do. And you end up having control over it that way. It seems like that's really worked out for you.
I love it.
That's so cool.
The fact that I have any creative control in my own job is like the most delightful thing at all. And that has come from years of working really, really hard and building trust with like art direction directors and the different game teams that we work with. Like, thank goodness that they trust what I do or that they're on board with the ideas that I have. It's really, really, like, I worked hard to get there.
Right.
But thank
and you
goodness that I
sacrificed
have
a lot to do that. Yeah. Yeah. That's the most important thing is be willing to let go of that. And it ends up paying out in the long run.
Very much so.
That's really great. So I guess for you moving forward with Blizzard, you're probably not going to leave anytime soon, huh? And also you guys are, I think, the best cinematic house out there. Well, you guys in Blur, I just love the stuff you guys do. It's truly remarkable. I got
so much respect for the folks at Blur. We've got a lot of former Blur guys that are working in cinematics. You know, I just love artists making cool art, like seeing other games create cool cinematics, like all the stuff with Assassin's Creed.
Oh yeah,
those cinematics are so cool.
The slow pans of the I've got a couple of those on my head. Sometimes I just go to your guys' site and I just throw those on just to like inspiration, whatever.
Just like people making cool cinematics of all these like wonderful things. Like I can't get enough of it, and I feel really, really happy that Blizzard as a company invests in cinematics. You know, that they want that to be a part of the epic storytelling that they're presenting within the games themselves. Like, how cool is that? That makes me just so proud to be a part of it, you know? Right. And just, I feel really lucky that the company does invest that in and back into us.
Yeah, because story is so important these days, now more than ever, especially in games. And with, you guys have this sort of hybrid between the two. The cinematics kind of serve as these films in a way. You know, the narrative between one cinematic to an update or a new release of something else is like those tie in together, and then you put those things together, you end up having a movie. And the fact that you guys even, made a Warcraft movie is incredible, which
much fun.
I can only imagine. How was that?
Well, so they let like way back with working on Warcraft, right? They had the cinematics team, like a couple folks on cinematics do a lot of the previs concepts.
Okay.
So we gave the guys that ultimately worked on all the digital assets. So it was like ILM and some folks, right, working on all the digital stuff, and Weta working on the physical creations. Well, we just sort of offloaded like all of our orcs and stuff to them. We're like, well, here's what we've made.
Yeah.
Totally use this as a jumping off point. So that was like really cool.
So they're taking that and maybe repurposing for that final asset. So it does give them a jump start, basically.
But like we did some like previs on the shield, on the king's sword, and some other things that they ended up printing out and then like actually crafting as like real life movie props for the movie itself, which was like, I wasn't involved in any of that stuff, but like watching from the outside, I was just like, that is so cool.
Like eye candy, basically, right? Like I'm going to make that myself.
Yeah. Oh, it was so much fun. But like the movie itself, they had an auction.
Oh,
so
what?
The movie did a movie prop auction that only a few people even knew. I bought so much stuff. So I make costumes all the time, and making stuff for my husband is just like a huge task because like designing stuff for men is way different than designing stuff for women.
So. You gotta get his body type, and did you like scan
what
him?
What looks good? I don't have a scan of Seth. I have a scan of me, which is awesome.
You can bug Paul. Paul's got a 3D scanner. He'll do one of Seth.
I should. But like, I was looking up measurements of the different actors. I was like, well, what actor? How big? How tall are they? How much do they weigh? Like, what's their shoe size? It's amazing what the internet
You can
provides.
find out almost everything.
No, you super can. And so I ended up buying 2 costumes that fit Seth because all of the women's stuff, the prices were astronomical.
Yeah.
But the men's stuff was pretty reasonable. So I bought him 2 costumes. One that Travis Fimmel, his character, wore.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then one was just this generic night elf guard.
Okay.
And so I bought 2 costumes, and
Did you put him in like a case, or you just wear these?
No, he wears them all the time.
That's amazing.
So like I made him wear one to a masquerade ball recently, and then right now, a bunch of the guys who are in management at Cinematics and in CDev, in all those teams, right? They're doing a team building exercise, just a couple of days, so 4 Fridays, and just for a couple of hours, and they're meeting up and they're playing D&D.
Wow. How cool is that?
But as a team building exercise, it makes super sense.
Yeah.
And it's a collaborative storytelling team building exercise.
From what I understand, that's a really serious investment too. Like D&D, like you're really going to get to know those people.
Yeah.
So like in working together and role playing, all of that.
Yeah, you'll learn how they think and approach problems.
Yeah.
So for one of the days that he went to go play D&D, he put on the whole costume, and then I put some elf ears on him because he's playing like an elven wizard. So he's been wearing costumes and then bringing like refreshments for everybody. Like it's just such like this delightful way to spend like the Friday afternoon when not a lot of work, at least on the management side, is like starting. Nothing's starting on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
But they're really getting to know their partners in crime of getting stuff done, and they're getting to know them through D&D, and then they're getting to know Seth through costumes and elf ears.
That's amazing.
I love it.
Do they even know what he looks like at this point? I mean, they only see him in costume.
But it just made me really, really happy. So like I got him those costumes, and he's already found multiple times to wear them.
So he's so down for all this.
Yeah.
Does he do his own stuff? Does he cosplay himself?
No.
Like in making his own work? So you're just like throwing him into the fire with all this?
Once in a while.
Yeah.
So I do leatherworking, and I do all kinds of stuff, and I love learning all of these skills. And so I was doing leatherworking like a shoulder piece and then like a chest and belt piece. And he's like, oh, I really want bracers. And I was like, I have no time left. Like, are you
like, dude,
serious?
come on, man. Tell me 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what you want bracers 3 days from the event? So I sort of explained to him like what to do, and he ended up making his own bracers. And it was this like
cool.
tiered pedal thing that we sort of kind of like agreed on a design, and he cut it out and did all the edges and the edge work and then dyeing them. Yeah.
So did you guys get into like doing ZBrush, like 3D printing some of these assets and
my
stages?
Goodness.
You probably do a lot of that.
I do a lot of like rapid prototype concept stuff in ZBrush, so I can kind of like wrap my head around something in 3D before I'm using the expensive materials.
I see.
So I'll definitely do that. I don't own a 3D printer.
Yeah.
That sounds like the danger zone.
I feel like that's exactly what you need. Could you imagine if you got, I mean, we have a MakerBot replicator too. We have a couple printers in the office, but that one little print bed gets you a whole lot of stuff. If you just start chopping up parts and keying them together.
You're tempting me with like.
I'm telling you.
You haven't seen my house, but it's like I have an entire room that's like 2 walls of fabric.
Oh, wow.
I've got an entire closet full of all of my leatherworking equipment, all the rolls of like really great leather that I dole out for per project. Downstairs is like all my chemicals for casting and like resin and silicone.
Is this all trial and error as you sort of educated yourself through all this?
It's all self-educated.
That's incredible.
Well, it's just like, you know how you've got like, at least I have a mind where I like to figure out how something's made.
Yeah.
And so like bending it around like a new thing is really fun and exciting. Like that's a very addictive process. I love learning. Like I love it. And there's no classes for this stuff. Like there aren't. I'm sure that there exist leatherworking classes, but not for what I wanted to do as my first project.
There's no YouTube channel for leatherworking?
I'm sure there are.
You can watch Tested.
Ooh,
Tested's got some pretty sweet stuff.
Those folks are so nice, too.
I know, they are.
Like one of the most recent leatherworking projects that I did, I actually got Grant Imahar to do all the laser cutting for me. Bless his heart. It's because he had the technology, and I don't have any technology. I'm very like, I sew with needles.
Yeah.
Right? But I had this idea of a thing to make, which I made for Seth. Which was this leather scale mail elven armor that was all leaves. So it was like oak leaves and birch and beech leaves all coming down.
Yeah.
And I started to work by using a soldering iron. I tried to do it by hand at first. And I was like, I'm going to kill myself if I have to continue this. And luckily, Los Angeles is a very small world.
Yeah.
And the geeky, nerdy community within Los Angeles is even smaller.
Oh, really?
Oh,
I'm surprised.
I know, like,
I feel like there's
I
mean, with all the conventions and things, I guess you would know all of them then.
Yeah.
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 I guess I guess I got to take myself out of this bubble that we live in.
Yeah.
For me, it's like there's so many people that I know that are into this kind of stuff, but I guess outside of that, there aren't that many, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Los Angeles is a really great hub for it.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're friends with friends, and then you meet people at all these like really geeky parties.
Yeah.
And I knew that he had this laser cutter, and I pinged him, and I was like, hey, like, you can say no, by the way, but I had this really cool idea, and I was wondering if I could, borrow your laser cutter for this. And he's like, that sounds amazing. Come on up, right?
Yeah.
So I made the digital file. So like I did all these ink drawings of really gnarly leaves and made like this file so that we could just directly print it onto the leather, and we're cutting out the leather so it fits in his machine, and he's burning it, and he's figuring out like, oh, what depth do I need to like calibrate my lasers? Bless his heart, because I didn't want to have to learn about lasers on top of learning about all of the leatherworking stuff,
just help me out with this part, and that'd be great.
But like the fact that he like made time to do it out of his super busy schedule.
Very cool.
I was delighted, because like this piece of art would not have existed if it hadn't been for a friend to be simultaneously excited about doing something.
The pay it forward system works great in the art community, right? Because
yeah.
then like later it'll be like, hey, maybe I need you to do this. Like, I need some other work done.
All the time. I'm just like, hey, if you need a costume thing, you just let me know, and I will hook you up. Like
That's
anytime.
so cool. So do you think you'll ever end up doing this as a full-time job?
I love working digital.
Yeah.
Having the power of the undo, but this is actually what I tell people. So I'm super selfish in my spare time. These are all my ideas. These are all like my creations. I make them in my own time with my own like envisionment of what it's going to end up being with no expectations, right? Like it's just me. And if anybody's disappointed in what I've created, it's just me.
Yeah.
And if somebody else likes it, oh, thank goodness, right? Like I adore that anybody would ever enjoy what I've made.
But that's not necessarily the reason why you do it.
But that is a really hard thing to shift gears and become a job. But I love working digital. I love making other people's visions come to life, and I love collaborating with all these artists digitally. Digital work is amazing. Like undo, saving your work in progress is kind of amazing. Working physical, you don't have those moments.
Yeah.
You can't go backwards very easily.
Right. Well, and that's where the trial and error comes into play, and then you just got to get really good at making that perfect right away.
Yes.
Because you're like, I don't want to spend I'm sure some of this stuff takes weeks, months, maybe even to
I've definitely done builds where something was like a 9-month project.
Whoa.
I don't do those anymore. I do, most of my projects are like a week.
Okay.
So like I think and make stuff for about a week, and that's from like concept to finish, and then we shoot it.
Yeah.
And that creative cycle is actually really healthy, because now I'm getting so much more stuff. Like last year I made about 40 different costumes on my weekends, and we did like hecka shoots, so many different adventures, and it's with friends and people I super care about. So this is actually how I spend time with people I love and adore. Is we go out into the middle of the forest pretending to be elves and doing like a little video.
And you guys have this like community in a way.
And
like,
it is.
Those are true, authentic friends and people that are interested in all the same stuff.
Yes.
That's so cool.
I love it. And I would never, while I do like a lot of what I do, I try to bring and celebrate my friends who are making a living doing this. So I'm like constantly like, check out how amazing this person is, and,
Yeah.
you know, commission them or, you know, totally use them. My friends who are videographers, I'm never like, hey, come do this thing for free. But I'm like, if this interests you, come on and hang out with us,
Yeah.
but like no pressure.
But if not, no big deal.
Yeah. And then they use that to like bolster their own portfolio to get them jobs that are more diverse. Same thing for like costuming, makeup artists, all of this stuff. Like I would never want to abuse these relationships.
Right.
Like I am happy to step up and do any of these jobs, but like if it can help or serve them in any way with the thing that they're trying to do on their own, like as a freelance artist, let me help. Like let me pimp your awesomeness. Let me celebrate your art in whatever way I can, because I super appreciate other artists.
I think that's such a beautiful thing. You're contributing to all these things in the most positive way possible.
Trying to.
It's a win-win because you're reaping all the benefits of having this sort of natural sort of progression of all these things and being able to maintain them all and keep you inspired. And that's so cool.
And in turn, I'm keeping all of these other artists, like they get creative energy from it too, you know, and they go back to their own lives and jobs where it's a marathon for themselves of creation. Yeah. And they feel fulfilled after these adventures, you know, so it's like adventure out to the middle of the desert. And then we all have noodles, hug each other and go home.
So you're getting them out of their desks and like, just come outside for a little bit.
Yeah. Just come adventure.
Wear some elf ears.
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
But, you know, I wouldn't trade what I do for a living with what I do for feeding it, because like that balance is necessary. Like I have to have both.
I see that.
I couldn't do just one.
One or the other wouldn't suffice for you.
No, not at all.
That's so cool. Well, I think it's really amazing. You're a true inspiration in all of these things, and I think a lot of people will get a ton of inspiration just from your positivity and the way that you go about these things. And it's a grind out there for a lot of digital artists.
It can be.
And it seems like your perspective and the way that you view all these things is so important. Mental health is a big deal.
It super is.
And, you know, don't get bogged down in all this production work too. It's like, have some fun, enjoy yourself.
Yeah. Cause like, you know, there was like a really big talk. We do, every once in a while at Blizzard, we'll do an art summit, which is kind of like the ZBrush Summit, but it's like the artists at Blizzard coming together and talking about like what it is to be an artist, to be a working artist, like cool techniques that we all want to try. And there was this one talk that Wendy Vetter, who is an environment artist or was an environment artist on the World of Warcraft team. And she talked about burnout, you know, and a lot of artists, like Blizzard is a very wonderful company. And a lot of artists who've been there have been there for many, many years.
Yeah.
Like I've been there for 12 years now.
Wow.
And almost 10 of those years have been as an artist. So, you know, burnout and running out of the energy and all of this stuff is like a very real thing that so many different artists do experience within the course of their career, especially if, say, you're an artist that's worked on one art style, one project for years and years and years.
Stuck in that thing.
Yeah.
You feel stuck.
It's like, well, what do you need to do to keep going? What do you need to do? And like, I've definitely found an equation that works for me. And I would never say, you have to do this.
Right.
This is how it is done. That's not true. It's different for every single person. For Wendy, it was photography. And it was that going out into the environment, out into the world, and like taking pictures of beautiful sequoias or going to like Lake Tahoe, stuff. And she would come back to work and suddenly she was like, oh my gosh, this whole environment that I'm going to make for this next expansion is, I'm so ready and I've got so much inspiration to go. And she was suddenly like alive again as an artist.
That's great.
And that's what it was for her.
Yeah.
And afterwards, you know, I was talking with her, I was talking with other artists, and we all were like, yes. Yeah. Like it is what you do on your weekends and in your evening that can feed back as an artist, and it's going to be what pushes this particular art piece to the next level at work. Yeah. And it was so cool to hear from everybody around me and for myself, because I had also experienced that. Right. I really, really love it. And it's actually something that I feel that all artists across all disciplines experience. Like I've talked with like Simon Lee about how he can keep going. Now he became an artist pretty late in life. Like he went from zero to awesome sculptor in like 5 years, right?
Yeah. And then ultra famous sculptor as well.
And he's amazing,
everyone
right?
referenced Simon Lee.
And, you know, and he'd been working hard and he'd never really experienced burnout because he had never burned himself out before, right? And then he's just like, well, how... So when he first approached it, you know, and he's like, well, I've never had this before. I've always had a fountain of ideas and motivation and fire in me to do all the things. Like, what?
Yeah. And like, what is it? What's happening?
Yeah. And you know, he and I were sitting there sculpting because I love sculpting with my hands too.
Yeah.
We're just sculpting, and I talked about what I did and how I found my own motivation, and just like listening to him, it's like, well, what do you need? Do you need like a martial art? Do you need meditation? Do you need, you know, what is it that's going to, you know, recenter you?
Yeah.
You know, because he's pushed so far into the art and like putting all of his heart and soul out.
Yeah, it becomes hard to detach from that. It's like you were saying earlier about, like, I got to sit in front of my computer, and all the weekends and nights have to be spent on this one thing. And the more I work, the better it's going to be. Yeah. But I think it really comes down to, as humans, is routine, isn't it? Routine is not always the best thing. You almost want to strive to be like a kid and be exploring things and be introduced to new things. The more that you can get introduced to new things, the more your brain chemistry changes, and you kind of start to see things for what they are and see it from a different lens, basically.
Yeah. Or open your eyes and see things completely anew.
Right.
I actually super recommend that people are constantly learning. Like, I love taking classes. I always, 100% of the time, I'm always taking a class a week on something.
Wow, a new class, something just totally
just in
different.
general, like I
or
will
just
always,
whatever you're into.
Yeah, whatever. So like right now it's Japanese, and language has absolutely nothing to do with my job. Like nothing. I am not talking at work really. You know, so language is really off discipline for me. But like what it's done for me mentally, like as an exercise, like I feel so invigorated learning something and finding progression within that. And, you know, we talked about this briefly off air, but like I'm at a company where people are from all over the world, like all over the world. The number of languages that are spoken in the coffee break room in cinematics is...
How many are there?
So many languages. Like it's everything. It's Chinese and French and Japanese. And I've been so lucky because I've been learning Japanese. I got all these guys at work that also speak Japanese that I can kind of bother them in a hopefully unobtrusive way, but like I could just ask them how their day is going. Some of them super do and are like, let's go have lunch, and then I'll practice my English with you, and then you can practice your Japanese with me, and I'll correct you. Yeah. I'll give you a whole new vocabulary that's maybe not suitable for class. I love it. And that class, like even though it's completely off discipline, is like massaging my brain and making it so that now if I have to learn something new, interdiscipline, so like a new game engine that I'm working on, or a new texturing pipeline that I have to like absorb, I'm actually learning those things faster because my brain is like exercised.
Yes, exactly. Because you get numb to these things. Eventually, just like you can look at a pretty skyline. Like I've been living in LA for 10 years now, and I remember looking at driving across town. You would see the mountains in the background. You'd see that skyline. After a couple of years, I don't see it anymore. Yeah. It goes away. I start seeing it so often, it's repetitive, and it just kind of blurs out. And then you're trapped in your mind or whatever it is. So I guess it is just like pull yourself out and like wake yourself up a little bit in a way. Yeah. Whatever that is, language.
Anything.
You know, take a spelunking class. I don't know.
Spelunking is terrifying.
I know. I would never bungee jump or spelunk, but I've been skydiving. Yeah. I've been hang gliding. I like climbing, but it's like there's certain things that I'm okay with and other things I'm just not, you know. Like anything tied to a rope going towards the ground, no thanks, I'll pass.
I've done rappelling, which I super recommend.
I'm okay with that. Like I mean, I'll lead climb and I'll and like, you know, have somebody belay. That's fine. Like you trust that person.
Have you ever like rappelling where you're your own rope?
No, I haven't. Well, actually, no, I have done that once before. Yes, which I'm okay with. Then it's in your hands and you have full control of that. Yeah, like if you ever go to like Point Doom out in Malibu?
Time, yes, yeah.
Point Doom, I've been there a handful of times. It's cool.
One of the times that I went there, like, and I was just learning rappelling. I was learning Australian style, so facing downward off the cliff, right? And I'm doing runs, and I'm getting really used to all the safety that's required for all of this stuff. And I look next to me, and there's this guy who's like, awesome. And then he freaking runs off the cliff and is like, rah, 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 right? And just leaps off with his whole rappelling stuff.
Like halfway.
And catches. And then swings and bounces into the cliff. And I was just like
show off.
It blew my mind. And I'm there with crazy. like a stunt guy. He's like a stunt director. So he does this for a living. And he's like, oh yeah, that guy all the time, right? And I'm like,
oh, that's Frank. Frank's here all the time.
But like, not necessarily do that.
Yeah.
But definitely like learn and don't feel like it reflects on you as a person that you have to learn something new, like figure drawing, sculpting in general, painting, like oil painting, like all these interdisciplinary things that'll really help you as an artist and grow you as an artist. Like, don't be scared to be bad at something and learn how to be good, or to try something new that's really intimidating, because then it'll mean that you're not as scared to try something new in the job itself that's like relevant to your work. Humans, we get so comfortable, we get so scared of the new thing or acknowledging that we don't know something. Like it's right?
That is totally a thing where not knowing something is not such a bad thing.
No.
It's like you said, being willing to learn and kind of always treating yourself as a student is a much safer place to be than the person who always has to be right and have an answer to everything, because then that's just so much more pressure, right? And instead of going, oh, I didn't know that. That's great. That's one more thing you can add to your arsenal and like legitimately know the next time, instead of going, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And
then furiously Googling later.
What is this? What? Yeah, exactly. Totally.
But like as an artist, like the healthiest thing that you can do is just keep yourself in that student mindset in whatever class form that you choose to take. But it's really good for your brain, and it's really good for you learning new things just in general. Yeah. In and out of discipline. So.
Yeah. Well, you have such beautiful advice. I hope all the listeners, this is going to go up very soon. So we're very lucky to have you as a Sculpt-Off host with Joseph. Hopefully you'll come back, and hopefully in a couple of years, maybe you'll compete yourself.
I look forward to just like, sculpting. I really should, I say this all the time, right? Like, because I love my spare time hobbies, but I really should do some like ZBrush stuff and put it out there that's not related to my work. Yeah. Because all the ZBrush stuff I do for work, unfortunately, is like behind the curtain of NDA. Sure.
Of course, there's a lot of stuff you can't talk about in the technical stuff, but I would imagine all this cosplay and all the design work that you're putting into clothing and drapery and getting into Marvelous and all that stuff. But like, I would bet that if you sat down and started doing that stuff in your own free time, if you had it, you'd probably kick out some really awesome stuff.
I really ought to like just make a point. Usually I just set aside like a month. I'll be like, this is the month of blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And so I owe it to myself to do a month of that because.
I feel like you're going to get to that eventually, maybe. You might end up wanting to take a break from cosplay and do some digital work. No,
exactly.
For a while.
Like, variance and variety and all that is the spice of life. Yeah. So should definitely do a little bit of everything.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was a true pleasure. And I guess this podcast will be coming up pretty soon. So we'll be looking forward to posting that. And thanks again.
Oh, no, thank you.
Cheers.